Since the 1970s, video games had to be different from each other to stand out. How did they do that? They would have to have cool art and logos to make the customers buy their video game. Even in the arcades, cabinets had to look different from each other to get audience to put their quarters in. And this became very prevalent during the 1990s, where competitive video games were getting popular in the arcade scene. And this genre that I wanted to talk about in the arcades is about fighting games. Fighting games are the main reason why the arcades were booming in the 1990s. With the release of Street Fighter II, this caused a huge boom in the fighting game market with many companies to test the waters. When companies realized that they could market home consoles as well, this caused them to spend a lot of time and effort not just to get the port of the arcade game onto the systems, but to market the game to give nice box art to fit what the game is about. A lot of the video games that I chose pretty much hit the mark on what the concept of their game was. But I did have to limit myself to not make this video 5 hours long because I would be dead if I did that. However, there is some poor artwork and bland covers in this video that I wanted to talk about, but there's one fighting game series I really wanted to start with, and that series is the Street Fighter series. Street Fighter 1 was one of the first fighting games to be made ever, so Capcom didn't know what they were doing with the cover, and it was just a bunch of poorly drawn people fighting well in the street. However, this doesn't mean that they hit the concept perfectly. The colors chosen in this cover are very muted and dark compared to the later entries. However, the focus of the cover is the main protagonist Ryu, covered in fire with the Street Fighter logo sticking out as well. The first version of the Street Fighter II cover is very iconic, with the focus of this piece still being the fighters that you can play in the game, but if you look at the cover, you can tell how much unity and form that this cover has. Even with the placement of the fighters being very balanced in the artwork, you can see the text in the bottom that does not overpower the poster at all. Even with the flags and the countries of these fighters are even grayed out to not make it distracting to the people's eye. The logo has been updated to have a Roman numeral 2 to make the player and the watcher know that Street Fighter 2 is completely different from the previous installment. Super Street Fighter 2 has a whole new box art showing the amount of customization you can have with the characters you play in this game. The reason why the same characters are there more than once is because of how many colors you can choose for your character, making it a very dynamic and crowded art piece showing the characters that are looking at the player to tell them that they should play them. The updated logo still focuses that it's still Street Fighter 2 but has updated completely. The words Super in this game's title are colored in the exact opposite colors that the original Street Fighter 2 logo had, with the yellow text on the bottom still sticking out with the rest of the logo that you can tell that there's new challengers in it. A cool little detail in this cover that isn't the focal point is that there's a pale yellow letters on the bottom saying the tournament battle, which I find really neat. Street Fighter Alpha, or Street Fighter Zero in Japan, is a prequel to Street Fighter 2, but came out later to make something new that wasn't Street Fighter 2, but still used similar characters so veteran players were still hooked on the series. And with the first cover of Street Fighter Alpha 1, you can tell. The two main characters in the series, Ryu and Ken, were younger and the main focal point of this cover and game. What I see in this cover first is the yellow in Ken's hair and the white in Ryu's headband and gi. The background gives a very serious tone to the cover with the black and red gradient to tell the audience that they're getting into something that Street Fighter series has never done before. Even with the new logo being futuristic and simple, and keeping the brushstrokes that the original Street Fighter 1 and 2 did with their lettering, but changing the colors to be a red and blue chrome instead of the fiery and yellow. Keep that in mind when we see later updates to the Street Fighter Alpha series. A lot of fighting game players will tell you how iconic this cover is, keeping the tone and seriousness of this installment of Street Fighter, but changing the hotter red to more of a cooler blue in the background. The artist went with a darker tone, with the face-off between Ryu and one of his main enemies, Akuma. Another reason to think that the cover is amazing is that Akuma is higher and more menacing than Ryu. This gives the audience a feeling of higher stakes in this game, and with the face of Ryu's karate student Sakura being in the background, not really standing out compared to the other two. The logo has changed in many ways than just the shape and the coloring of the Street Fighter name. It got more yellower and changed to blue to be stronger than the blue tone of the artwork that the cover has. The logo has also changed, filling more space to give the red number 2 more room. Now, let's get to the final one in the Street Fighter Alpha series. I'm going to say this right now, I'm not a fan of this cover at all. The logo is very good, however, with keeping the simplicity of the red and orange that the original Street Fighter 1 logo had, but using the futuristic tone that the other Street Fighter Alpha logos did. The artwork is a huge downgrade, with like this ripped paper aesthetic. I'm not really a fan, but like a lot of Capcom fighting games use this as well. It's just not a bad cover, but like, it's not the best at all. The Street Fighter 3 series, as in all of the other series that I've shown you from Street Fighter, is so different from each other, and you can see it here as well. Using black and gold template that they were given with the arcade cabinets stood really well with the very gritty and angular artwork of each fighter here and how diverse they look. Ryu and Ken aren't even in the way front. They're reserved for a new character named Alex. Keep that in mind with the next installment of Street Fighter 3. The new logo here is different compared to the previous games in the series, with keeping the red and orange, but calling back to the original Street Fighter 2 logo with adding Roman numerals instead of just using regular numbers. The title New Generation contrasts the darkness in the rest of the logo with the white, making sure that the audience knows that this is a new step in the Street Fighter series. So this cover might be one of the most underrated covers in the Street Fighter series as a whole. Alex is a focus again, and with this really interesting poses him as well. It makes me think he's gonna jump out of the cover and fight me or something. With a menacing illustration of Hugo, who is Alex's rival in this game, in the later installment as well. I'm not really a fan of this logo's placement, however, because of how unorganized it is. I like the color palette they chose to match with the artwork, however, but the text seems like it's a puzzle of scattered pieces all around it. It's really hard to give a sequel a name when it's just called Street Fighter 3, but I would have been really dumb if someone went with Street Fighter 3 2, so I don't really give Capcom that much hate. The next one is my favorite video game of all time, and this cover is such a masterpiece. This cover might be one of the best ones on this list. The reason being is not that they just went good on the artwork, but the logo as well. Still keeping the warmer and darker colors like the previous Street Fighter logos, but it changes the way you think about the title of this game. What I see first is the white lettering instead of the fire that burns in this logo. And the way they made the series name with the white letters fits so perfectly. The artwork of all the fighters is very strong and shows how all the fighters that they keep getting added in later installments vary from each other and represents the different backgrounds of each Street Fighter character. The balance in this piece reminds me of the previous Street Fighter 2 covers of all the crowded fighters making up the piece. The color fading on the bottom really gives the logo space to breathe and pop out of the white. The Street Fighter covers from now on show more realism in the series since that they're trying to push 3D models later in the game instead of 2D pixel art. Ultra Street Fighter 4 has a stoic illustration of an older Ryu, going back to him being the protagonist for a while. The warm colors fit really well with the main logo of this game, with calling back to the brush lettering that the previous games had before Street Fighter 3, with the gray lettering in the back contrasting really well with the orange and gold lettering and the Roman numerals of this game kinda going back to Street Fighter 2's logo. This cover is really good and still holds up for its time, just like the previous ones except for Street Fighter 1 of course. We are almost done with the Street Fighter games as a whole. Street Fighter V's box art uses the Roman numerals of the previous titles to the max. The warm and black colors are back from the Street Fighter 3 series logos, while making the number 5 very blocky and linear like the Street Fighter Alpha series logos. Instead of the brush lettering like in the previous games had, Capcom went with a really interesting route of making the letters look like a worn headband instead. At least that's how I see it. The artwork is kind of bland, and I don't blame Capcom for doing this, especially since a lot of video games had their protagonists in the backgrounds be black and white while having one color be a contrast. The logo is fine, but the artwork is not the best. The only thing I could give the artist credit for is the cute nod of Ryu doing a V with his arm, which is a Roman numeral 5. Kind of a letdown compared to Ultra Street Fighter 4, having the main character point be Ryu, just like this one. This cover is way better than the original Street Fighter 5 cover. This one was a cover that they made to send this game off with a bang. This one is a mix of red and blue, with the two main characters that fans love being Ryu from the previous game covers and Chun-Li, which I'm surprised I even haven't talked about in this video yet. They kept the same logo, but adding the name of this version just using the same color scheme. One of the villains in this game, named Gil, has a character design being both blue and red, so they added him faded in the background, kind of like Street Fighter Alpha 2's cover was with Sakura. The cover was a genuine improvement and giving fans what they want for this game. Now on to the last mainline Street Fighter game. Street Fighter 6 is the latest in the series with a whole new main character and style. The character named Luke has a very awkward expression in the cover, and it became a huge discourse over social media and fans making fun of how stupid he looked. The logo is very simplistic, which keeping the nod of the original Roman numeral style, but making the 6 vertical to make it an actual number 6. The blue and orange is a really nice tone shift compared to the other games in this series. This game hasn't come out yet during this time recording, so I'm very stoked to see what Capcom has in store. Street Fighter is one of my favorite video game series of all time, and I really wanted to talk about its history and how much it means to me. The artwork and aesthetic that this series has in each installment motivates me to draw and talk about it in videos, and I really want to make more videos in this style, but with other series, so I'll try to upload more. Thank you for watching this video and me rambling on a series, and I want to tell you how much I love it more than just the gameplay. Until next time, be kind to one another. Thank you.